where we are right now is basically 600 feet below sea level. You understand we're in a crack in the earth. We're in a rift, and it's called the Great Syrian African Rift. And it starts in northern Syria, and it goes all the way to the mid-continent of Africa to Victoria Falls, 4,000 miles. It's the largest crack in the earth, and you can see it from space, and the lowest point on Earth is just a few miles south of here at the Dead Sea. That's 1,300 feet below sea level. And so this crack in the earth is a great divide in a lot of ways, not just because of this, but it divided in the ancient world the countries on, as we're looking now from north to south, what you see of this southern plateau here, and you can see it is a plateau. That is, as Vered said, the Golan Heights, but this is the southern plateau, and it runs 35 miles up there to the foot of Mount Hermon. Now that in the scriptures was called Bashan in the Old Testament, Habashan, the Bashan. And you remember Amos talked about the cows of Bashan because it is a beautiful pasture land, and we'll be up there and you'll see it's a beautiful plateau. And at the southern end of this, where we'll be later on today, you will see a great crack in the earth again, and there is a river there, and it's called the Yarmouk River, Y-A-R-M-U-K, and that was the southern, all south of that was called Gilead in the Old Testament. And then north, of course, was the Habashan, the Bashan. And so all of these, or at least most of the divides, for the tribal divides, were around crevices in the earth and cracks in the earth and natural river divides. For instance, the land on down, the next big divide on that side over there, as we're looking north to south, the left-handed side, you have the Yarmouk here, and then the next divide that you will see is the Yabuk, the Jabbok. You remember, and that's where that Jacob wrestled with God there about all of that is on that side. On this side, if you can just get in your mind, the reason this is called Kinneret is it comes from the word Kenor, which is the Hebrew word for harp. This is Harp Lake. Why? Because it's shaped like a harp. The end down there, as you know, is more narrow, but it comes around. If you'll look at it on your maps, you will see there is a big bend, just like you would play a harp, an ancient harp, even an auto harp as we know it, is smaller on one end than the other, and that's why they call this Harp Lake Kenor, Harp Lake Kinneret, the little harp. And so for our interest as believers and followers of Jesus of Nazareth, this section from the Arbel, you see that pass, that big tall mountain there, that has great significance with the first revolt that ended up with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. There is a path that goes back that you follow up past the Horns of Hittin, which we will see later, which has great historical significance, because that's basically where the backs of the Crusaders was broken by Saladin, and a great battle was there, and we'll talk about that later. But that leads back to where we were yesterday, past Tabor up to Nazareth. And so this is the way Jesus would have come from Nazareth, and he would have come out at that fishing village of Migdal. Migdal, as Vered said, means tower. Now then, when we think of a tower, we think of a tower of protection. More than likely it was not a tower of protection, more than likely it was a fishing tower, where you got up high, and many times, even if you're up just a little bit, you can see over here, when we get closer, you can see fish, schools of fish, and you can say, and you can be in a boat, and you can't see them because you're too low, but they can, and they can tell you to go this way or that way. And remember, they were not fishing with a bobber or a float and a worm or a minnow. They were what we call seining in the South. They were pulling big nets. And so that is the fishing village where Mary of Magdala came from. And as you can tell, there was a road, and that road went all the way up and around. And if you can figure this, as far as I can tell in the scriptures, from that point right there over to this point over here, where I'm pointing right now, that is where the demoniac with the legion of demons would have been in this area right over here, and we'll be over there later today. And we'll see a city set on a hill, Susita. It's called Hippus. It was one of the cities of the Decapolis. In the area I'm looking at right now, and you're seeing me stretch my arms up toward where the mouth of the Sea of Galilee is, 70% to 75% of all the miracles recorded in the Bible that Jesus did were recorded from here to here. So you see how important this is. Most of the time, again, the Bible's not complete in details, but most of what's recorded that Jesus did in the New Testament is before your eyes and what you're seeing right here. And that's how important this area is for study and for understanding what Jesus did. And so you can see Tiberias, we don't ever read of him going into Tiberias. Why? That was a Roman stronghold, just as at the southern end of the lake on the other side was another Roman stronghold. But most of what Jesus did happened right along those shores. Why? Because that's where the fish were. Remember, the Bible is filled with supernatural, so we don't have to add it. We just need to take it as what it is. The reason these people lived along this lake here and this end is because that's where the springs are. That's where the Jordan River runs in due north at 12 o'clock. That's where all the silt would have come in. That's where the fish were. That's where the springs were. And so that's why they were there. As fishermen, you go where the fish are. And so that's exactly what was happening. Now, I was talking to you yesterday. Now think about it, there were tax stations from Tiberias here all the way up and on to Damascus. By the way, just above us here is the road to Damascus. This is the way Paul would have gone to Damascus. And we'll be on that road tomorrow as we go up north. We'll be looking in the very area where Paul would have made his way to Damascus. But there were toll stations, tax stations, and sitting at one of those was a local by the name of Matthew. And over again, you can imagine tax stations right along, people walking along. The people were taxed according to the fish. You remember Jesus even said to Peter, go catch a fish. What's in its mouth, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and unto God that which is God's. Jesus paid tax just like everybody else, and what he was supposed to do. And so when you see these kinds of things happening, then you start thinking about relationships. These people knew one another. Again, Jesus didn't just walk up and say, come follow me, and they had never seen him before. They knew who he was. They knew his background. They knew the miracles that he was. And these were people who were real people just like us. This is why C.S. Lewis, the great philosopher, a contemporary with Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, and now C.S. Lewis is known not for his great theological works, but mostly for the Chronicles of Narnia, which Tolkien told him would never work, would never be seen, that he might as well put them away. So much for Tolkien. And all to say, C.S. Lewis, that is why he said, knowing what he knew about this area, that you really either have to receive Jesus Christ as who he said he was, or he's the biggest liar that ever walked the face of the earth. He's the biggest deceiver that ever walked the face of the earth. Because he said, he didn't just claim to be a prophet, he claimed to be the God of creation. He claimed to be something that no one else had ever claimed and had works to back it up. And so when you see this, these people saw this. It wasn't a bunch of people just making up things. If they had of, do you die for things that you just make up, that you know is a lie? They saw the miracles. They saw the lame healed. They saw the dead raised. They saw the demons cast out. They saw this over and over again. Why? They were living here. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This is a small area. This is just a sparsely populated area compared to what we know in the United States. Everybody knew what was going on. That's why over and over again, it was spread throughout the Galilee. It was spread throughout the Galilee. Well, you can imagine somebody just in your town, if demons were cast out, if the dead were raised, and hundreds were witnessing that, and people that were once crippled, they were walking and dancing and jumping, I think it would make kind of headlines in your area as well. Well, that's exactly what happened here. And so I want you to understand that, again, that statement I made is for real. All discipleship is relational. Now let me just bring that home to where we are today. After being a pastor for 32 years, I assure you if I went back into the pastorate, which I may do one day, God only knows, but I can tell you things will be different. Because what I have learned over the past years by studying intensively this is that in order for discipleship to really be discipleship, the relationship has to start before the person becomes a Christian. And then it must continue after they become a Christian. You don't just all of a sudden become a Christian. There has to be a relationship before that time, and the deeper that relationship before that time, the more intense the relationship of discipleship afterwards. And so we think going up and knocking on doors and going cold turkey and just out here somewhere, that's the way we do evangelism. That's not the way they did it in the New Testament. It was friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, family member to family member. And that's the way that they changed the Greco-Roman world, and it's the only way we're going to change the world in which we're living. And when we've gotten away from that, we've seen the results of it. American Christianity is dying, just like European Christianity did. Why? Because they were more interested in decisions and counting heads than they were hearts and lives being changed. And so we need to be careful and learn the lessons of history. We're not just over here on a tour to help us know more about God. My prayer is that over here you'll learn and know more about God so you can know Him better, and your life will be changed. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go and begin to see some of these places, and you will see the close proximity and relationship as to where these events are, and some of the things that you've heard all of your life will now make sense. Why? Because they were spoken within a context. They were spoken within a historical, geographical, cultural context. The Bible is not an American book. Growing up on the farm as I did in abject poverty, we had sayings, we had idioms, we had cliches. And when I went to San Diego, a very cosmopolitan city, the most unchurched city of the 10 major cities in America, when I pastored the First Baptist Church there, I got up one morning and the people were looking at me with the blank stares on their face, and I said, "You're looking at me like a calf looking at a new gate." Well, I might as well have been speaking Chinese. They had no clue what I was talking about because they had never been on a farm. They had never seen a calf looking at a new piece of fence that they'd never seen before and staring and being paralyzed in its tracks. We talk about a deer in a headlight, that kind of look. Well, those are idioms. Well, many of the things that Jesus said were idioms, and they make no sense to us, but once we see them, we go, "Oh, yeah, oh, man, oh, why?" You know, you see, this is so good. Well, that is what we want you to see. We want you to see that the Bible is a Jewish book, and if we're going to understand it, we're going to have to understand it in its Jewish culture. That's why 90% of all pastors I deal with now in America, graduates of seminaries, some with PhDs, don't understand that we understand what Jesus prayed at the Passover. They don't even know it's the Passover meal. They think it's still like Da Vinci's all sitting up like, sick-looking, weakly, white, Italian, skinny men all around. And the reason that portrait is like that is because sickly, white, skinny Italians painted it. And so we've got to understand that there is something to the culture. And once we do that, then all of a sudden everything begins to make sense. And so that's what we will do as we continue around this lake today. Things are going to make sense in your Bible that have never made sense before.